Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm their friend and guest, Alan Singer.
Dr. Alan Singer, educator and historian. Thanks again for joining us, Dr. Singer. We do have stuff that your expertise will be sorely needed on. Sad news that I have to report and at least mention: three major people in my life and in media have passed. I'll start by mentioning Michelle Materre. Michelle was a media studies professor at the New School. She's been a marketer, a curator of films. As a matter of fact, her creatively speaking film series about independent filmmakers who make films for and by people of color and about people of color has been a long running series that she curated over the years, even as she was teaching at the New School. And she's helped so many filmmakers over the years, myself included, including hand-holding me through the IFC back in 1999 when Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home came out. And so I'm going to pay her tribute by rolling in something that I did for her. If you folks will just bear with me, okay? I'll do a share screen. And once we share the screen, I will just go ahead and let it speak for itself. Let's get to that particular screen that I'm trying to share. I'm looking at the thing sitting on my screen, but it's not coming. Here it is. Bingo. Share. And those were some of the many filmmakers she interacted with, mentored, advised over the years. And there have been a gazillion tributes to her up on social media. But it was a bad weekend because our old colleague and friend, Bob Christopher Moore, Schomburg historian, archivist, Schomburg Center, and author, good colleague, friend of mine, without whom the African burial ground, without his efforts, might have gotten bulldozed over because he raised the red flag and got more media people to jump on that story. He passed on Sunday, and folks may not remember. So yeah, let me see if I can at least let folks see a little bit of what Chris looked like back in the day. And even recently, he too passed. He was an author. His last book, I believe, was Black Soldiers, the Unsung Heroes of World War II. Journalist, because he indeed was a radio reporter for ABC News back in the day, and wrote a number of articles, and a proud descendant of the Lenni Lenape people and the early African colonizers of the New Amsterdam colony. He was a true New Yorker to the roots, indeed. And Chris passed on Sunday. His wife, Kim Yancey Moore, survives, and he has 2 sons as well. And to round out my poor weekend of friends, colleagues, and mentors, going off Westin, the executive producer of the ABC Evening News, World News Tonight, 2020 News Magazine, Our World Documentary Unit, true broadcast pioneer, without whom his influence and mentorship, I would not be where I am and doing what I'm doing in media today. He passed on Saturday, this past Saturday. Of course, we're airing the Monday after the Wednesday we're taping, so it's 2 Saturdays ago when folks see this. Bob, you may recall the giant that Westin was in the news business. You know some of his colleagues, legendary colleagues like Friendly and Edward R. Murrow. He's one of Morrow's boys, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about pioneers in television news, Westin was definitely one of them. I mean, we were talking about, I was just telling you about how ABC News pivoted from basically an also-ran to a major competitor against CBS and NBC, and Westin had a lot to do with that in the 20th century. And I'm glad you're mentioning his passing, because for the life of me, I can't find a good obit. Seems like we've overlooked a major person in the TV news, in the history of TV news. When I look up his name, you see other names like Don Hewitt, 60 Minutes, Fred Friendly, later at Columbia, but of course from CBS News, and the other TV giant. So yes, a major passing, but this one seems somewhat overlooked.
Yeah, hopefully they're going to rectify that within the next few days. I hope. Let's see. But that's it for such a bad weekend of sadness and sorrow.
But let me just say about Michelle Materre. Yeah, the couple times I saw her, she was always inundated after whatever program it was with both current students and alumni, people who had learned under her. So yeah, a major passing in the anybody who learned under her.
Glad you mentioned that, Bob, because she was such a loving, giving spirit. I just cannot say enough about her. But anyway, enough of sadness. But no, she's got a big spirit that's still with us, so it's not going to be sad. I have a piece that says, lift your voice in song, raise your voice on high, mark her passing, let the world know she came this way. So anyway, Alan, sorry you sat there on the sidelines, but guess what? You're in it right now. The stuff that's happening when we're taping is right after President Zelensky spoke to our government. So give us an update on what we should be looking for and where we are on that particular story.
All right. Eric, can you close out of screen share? Because I'm going to share my screen.
Sure.
There's a lot of news on Ukraine, and a lot of it relates to media coverage, and I think that's important. You spoke about these pioneers, but there are people who are doing pioneering work today. President Zelensky spoke to Congress, President Biden responded, and the United States is promising aid. But a real hero emerged earlier this week. And if I mess up her name, please forgive me. Mariana Osianakova. She's a woman in she's 43-year-old mother of two. She was a producer for a major Russian television station. And she decided she could not abide the lying that the station was doing on the air. So she went behind the broadcast with a sign protesting and saying we have to teach the truth about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And she was immediately arrested. So far, she's been fined, but she faces jail. She could get as much as 15 years for that act of defiance on the media. I'd like to play what she did and her explanation. So I'll share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully I have it here. No, that's the wrong thing, I think. Oy.
Like we said, technology, when it works, it's great.
All right, let me fix it. All right, here it is.
There we go.
Again, this
На встрече
is
со своим белорусским коллегой российский премьер подчеркнул, надо усилить сотрудничество в рамках союзного государства, а на совещании в правительстве обсуждали, как сохранить доступность лекарств. То, что сейчас происходит на Украине, это преступление. И Россия – страна-агрессор. И ответственность за эту агрессию лежит на совести только одного человека. И этот человек Владимир Путин. Мой отец украинец, моя мать русская. И они никогда не были врагами. И это ожерелье на моей шее как символ того, что Россия должна немедленно остановить братоубийственную войну. И наши братские народы еще смогут примириться. К сожалению, последние годы я работала на Первом канале, занимаясь кремлевской пропагандой. И мне сейчас очень стыдно за это. Стыдно за то, что позволяла говорить ложь с экрана телевизора. Стыдно за то, что позволяла зомбировать русских людей. Мы промолчали в 2014 году, когда все это только начиналось. Мы не вышли на митинги, когда Кремль отравил Навального. Мы просто безмолвно наблюдали за этим античеловеческим режимом. И сейчас от нас отвернулся весь мир. И еще 10 поколений наших потомков не отмоются от позора этой братоубийственной войны. Мы, русские люди, думающие и умные. Только в наших силах остановить все это безумие. Выходите на митинги, ничего не бойтесь. Они не могут пересажать нас всех.
Yeah, that was really powerful. And again, she faces jail time because of this. And it was very, very brave. She's a hero for our time.
Oh.
And we need heroes.
I can't even begin to express my sense of awe and wonder that she had the guts to do that, because she can be in a gulag somewhere forever and never be heard of again. So yeah, stay on the Ukraine theme. You had one of the columnists somewhere in Washington Post or someplace else that had a perspective we should at least explore quickly, because I'm sure we're running short of time, but if you want to dig into that real quick, let's do it.
Well, again, Matt Bay, writing in the Washington Post, had a very important op-ed piece. Mm-hmm. And, we saw President Zelensky on TV today, and we saw President Biden responding. And the United States there's been a lot of rallying to support Ukraine, because what has happened is a horrific humanitarian crisis, tremendous brutality on the part of the Russian military. But as Bay pointed out, we have to act to try to counter this humanitarian crisis. We have to help the refugees. hopefully to stop the bombing, but that the interests of the United States and Ukraine don't match up perfectly. Because the overwhelming interest in the United States is to prevent a controversy, a military controversy between the world's two major nuclear powers. The United States cannot risk going to war with Russia because it could mean global annihilation. And so what Bay said is the United States has to support Ukraine, but it can only do so up to a point. Some of the other people that I've worked with in Brooklyn for Peace and also historian for peace and against war have also pointed out that at some point we're going to have to discuss what role the United States and NATO played in precipitating this crisis. Because in the 1980s, NATO pledged it would not expand into Eastern Europe, but NATO has now expanded up to the Russian border, and they have offered a partnership with Ukraine, something that Russia will not tolerate. And so there needs to be an examination of what were some of the underlying steps that brought us here. Nothing justifies what Russia has done. It is inhuman. But we also need to look at what's been going on by other nations.
That 1980 discussion and the accords, I forget, what's the name of the accords that they signed? There were two sides to that accord where the US and the Soviet Union, at the time Soviet Union, pledged that they would not violate.
Well, a lot of them related to nuclear weapons, and a lot of the nuclear weapon accords are expiring. And
they gave up their nuclear weapons, Ukraine did, for this pledge that Russia would not invade them or violate their nuclear space. And the US said, yeah, and we will protect Ukraine's right to sovereignty. And maybe what you were referring to was that we're not going to bring NATO to the border of Russia. I'm not quite sure all the particulars, but there are guarantees East and West to Ukraine that neither side seem to be living up to right now. And that's part of the problem that we're sitting on, as you just said. Bob, what was that thing about the no-fly zone, and we can't risk the no-fly zone because that puts the two powers?
Well, I mean, basically a no-fly zone means you need to enforce it. Means if they fly over the zone under what you just announced, you need to shoot them down. I mean, and we just can't get into that. We just can't have, Americans firing anti-aircraft missiles at Russian fighters or whatever.
Planes,
helicopter
planes.
Yeah,
Right.
It can't happen.
And that's the dicey situation the world is sitting on, because we got a guy with nuclear weapons who's threatening to use them. All right, so we can't.
Let me just say the other point. Americans can help. I sent medical supplies to Ukraine, actually for refugees at the border. And in my case, it was organized through my college, but a lot of organizations have raising money, or you can donate supplies. And I think that's worthwhile because people are really suffering. Another thing that's, a lot of Americans are complaining we're suffering because gas prices are going up. And the answer is that we have to, dig more, drill more. But I think the answer is we have to shift away from fossil fuels.
Yeah.
If we learn the wrong lesson from this, we will then wreck the environment even worse. The lesson from here is cut out the fossil fuels.
This is the ideal time to make the major shift. We just need people to stand up and talk about that and actually act on it. But we got people like Joe Manchin and a bunch of other folk who are still trying to hold on to fossil fuel because they're making a ton of money. Let me not propagandize. Bob, you were holding on to something about a Queens rally, or was it you, Alan? Because we don't have much time, but I want to get to those kids in Queens that were rallying against Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, because the kids in Queens understand that if one state passes a bad law, as we've seen on other issues, which you can get into, Alan, what was that? Who was the group in Queens, Bob?
I don't remember the name of the group, but they were protesting right outside of Citi Field in Flushing, Queens. I think Alan has a little bit more detail, but yeah, they got on the news. They did a good job. And just for your planning purposes, we have about 6 minutes.
Okay, ABC did a lot of coverage on it, ABC News, and it's the LGBT network. And they rallied with signs saying, "We say gay." And I think it's important because the law passed in Florida has not yet been signed by the governor, but it will likely be, really removes gay people from schools, so you can't learn. It's like they're erasing them.
Mhm.
And that is very, very scary. And it was interesting. A lot of the speakers were from high school. There was a speaker from Landmark High School in Queens. There was a speaker from Sayville High School in Long Island. So these are teenagers who are fighting for their right to be who they are. And I think ABC News deserves credit for featuring this story.
We just like issues that sort of get clouded over because of Ukraine gobbling up all the air.
Yeah.
We're glad that those kids are saying, okay, we know Ukraine's here, but we got a cause we want you to know about. And ABC was there, which is great. And I'm glad we were able to realize that this was happening because we wanted to talk about Florida and Florida's crazy laws. Alan, tell us about your take on that gay bill, how it ties to Texas's anti-abortion. You can't do whatever. Go ahead.
Well, you can't say gay bill. It's just a form of censorship. And the reality is you can't censor human brains as much as they try. And you can't erase 10% of the population. In Texas and Idaho have passed a somewhat different law. What they've done is they've passed laws that will reward people with money if they report people who had abortions. And the Supreme Court did not rule on it yet because technically neither Texas or Idaho are party to this. Now, what's so scary about this is this kind of law was done before in the 1850s. And it was called the Fugitive Slave Act. And so what they're doing is they like going back to the Fugitive Slave Act to now attack people who are, or take away people's reproductive freedom. And it's very scary that the Supreme Court would not act on this. And what they're saying is, if you heard that a cab driver drove someone to a medical facility and they had an abortion, that cab driver could be sued. It's ridiculous.
I was reading some of the differences between the Idaho proposal and what they've done in Texas. They can do that in Texas. They can't do that in Idaho. I think it's limited to family members, but it's still, 95% as bad as what they've done in Texas. But this is part of the Republican playbook. I mean, abortion, gay rights. I mean, we haven't even spoken about voter suppression. It gets votes within certain communities, and DeSantis in Florida knows exactly how to use that. And that is a major problem, which we can't seem to get out from under.
Yeah, DeSantis, interestingly enough, has decided to take Trump's playbook and put it in effect in Florida, because he's passing all of these different laws that are basically Trumpism being made legal. And his popularity seems quite high in Florida, but I remember a couple of shows back, we talked about a group of parents in Florida who said, we're not just going to sit idly by. And they pushed back, and they were a template we are hoping that other groups will pick up. But interesting enough, Youngkin in Virginia, who's passed similar laws about tip lines and email whatever so people can send in tips about what's going on where, he basically has been getting pushback from his entire school system.
Yes.
Pushback.
Hundreds of school superintendents have said this is ridiculous.
I am really hopeful that other people will take note of that. I'm guessing that we're almost out of time.
We have about 90 seconds, have about a minute and a half.
90 seconds.
Yes.
We don't have time for any of the other issues that we thought we might want to talk about. So basically, what I would say is try to do what you can to help refugees everywhere, not just Ukrainian refugees, because we've got a ton of refugees across the globe. Let's do our best to call attention to all these crazy laws that Texas is passing, that Florida is passing, and try to help people fight back and stay safe personally, because there's a new variation. The Deltacron variation is coming. There's another Omicron variation that China is fighting. And so when these new variations pop up somewhere, it ends up here.
I went to William.
That it?
Well, they're actually discussing whether some of the elderly people, I'm not saying identifying anybody, we should get a fourth booster shot.
Hey, I'm in that age group.
So am I. I'm getting online just in case.
So I'm guessing this is about the end of
Yes.
our time. This has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on Twitter and YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And I'm their friend and guest, Alan Singer. Thank you very much for having me tonight.
Thanks again, Dr. Singer. Stay well, folks. Stay safe and wash your hands. Wear a mask. We'll catch you the next time.